First up is George Owen Gore II, who became allergic to fame. Handsome George here first tasted fame when he played the part of the son of a detective in New York Undercover from 1994 to 1998, and did it so well that the NAACP gave him a trio of awards. But perhaps his most memorable role was as Big Head Jr. in My Wife and Kids, an ABC sitcom that ran for 5 years and had Damon Wayans, Tisha Campbell-Martin, Jazz Ray Cole, and others as a part of the main cast. Now, George O. Gore II is assuredly not in this video because he has a smile that can charm the tail off a rattler. The guy only has 7 movie credits and has been in the same number of shows, and that doesn't make sense for an individual of his abilities and reach. The simple explanation for all that is that George and fame don't get on well. In a 2017 interview, he said, "I'm a quiet guy. I like being behind the scenes. I'm no good at being famous. I like being creative, just focusing more on my writing now." These days, he writes and produces, and back in 2004 and 5 directed seasons 4 and 5 episodes of My Wife and Kids well enough that no complaints were heard. Be sure to stick to the end to see what happened to Steve Stifler. If you thought that Junior story was surprising, wait till you hear this next one, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Next up, we have Leslie David Baker, who we thank for giving us memes by the boatload. This Chicagoan played the role of a grumpy paper salesman for 9 seasons, and along with his fellow castmates, earned Screen Actors Guild Awards in 2007 and 2008. Around a couple of years ago, he launched a successful Kickstarter campaign to get funds needed to launch a The Office spin-off. The proposed spin-off is not yet on our screens, though, and there's no concrete word on when it will be. And as to why Leslie is not on our screens as much as we would like, the fact remains that he was never the kind of actor to snag lead roles. His limited range and abilities means he's never on screen for long in any movie or show he was cast in. While he's never had much difficulty finding work, if you blinked, you might miss his brief on-screen appearances, and that tends to give the impression that he faded out of sight after The Office. Then there is Angus T Jones, aka Jake. Angus's biggest work in cinematic history is undoubtedly 2.5 Men, the CBS sitcom in which he played Jake Harper. The show had excellent ratings, and by the time he was 17, Angus was the highest paid child star in the world, pulling in $300,000 per episode. But by the 2010s, he started becoming really religious, and on some Sundays would go to up to 4 churches to hear the pastors preach the word. Angus eventually joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and in November 2012, he told the public via a YouTube video that he had been baptized and no longer wanted to appear on 2.5 Men. He also described the show as filth, told fans to give their eyes a rest and watch more wholesome stuff, and stated, "You cannot be a true God-fearing person and be on a television show like that." Though he later apologized for what he said, the deed had been done, and in March 2014, Jones publicly quit, saying he felt like a paid hypocrite and wanted to share his faith with the world via Bible-based stories. He's only made brief appearances on a handful of TV shows since then, including a season finale cameo on 2.5 Men. And while he doesn't want to go back to acting, producers, for good reason, aren't exactly knocking down his door to hand him roles. Then we have Mara Wilson, who played Matilda back then. Y'all might know her from Mrs. Doubtfire, 1993, Melrose Place, 1993, and Batman Beyond, 1999. In 2000, she quit acting to focus on her writing career, and so far has 2 books out. Mara's movie comeback began in 2012, and nothing she had done had attracted as much publicity and acclaim as her earlier works. In her 2016 autobiography, she details how she slowly became disenchanted with the movie industry and how she felt so overworked that on her 13th birthday, the most important thing on her wish list was a day off. She also talked about her struggles with low self-esteem, the sad reality of the sexualization of child actors like her, and not feeling pretty enough to be a movie star. Mara felt forced to get cosmetic surgery to secure her stay at the top. She could either stay the way she was made and make do with less than impressive character actor roles, or accept that she was never going to be pretty and quit the acting world. And she took the latter course of action at age 13, no less. As we said, she has staged a comeback of sorts these days and has been doing a lot of web series. Then there is Jack Gleason, who is known by Game of Thrones fans as the actor behind Joffrey Baratheon, one of the most hated villains in television history. Gleason has been acting since he was 8, and soon after putting in a critically acclaimed performance as King Joffrey from 2011 to 2014, he retired from professional acting, but has since made a return since 2020. But why did he initially retire? Well, Gleason played Joffrey Baratheon on Game of Thrones, and with rare skill, too. Movie folks eventually started seeing him as Joffrey Baratheon rather than who he was, Jack Gleason. He therefore started getting tons of hate mail and even death threats. So when his on-screen character was killed off, he made the wise decision to retire and focus on building up his theater company. Asked by Entertainment Weekly why he quit acting, he said he had gotten bored with it all and needed a kind of break, even joking that the day he had the most fun on GOT was during the funeral of King Joffrey, where he could play dead and sleep all day. Jack Gleason got married last year, and no, the bride was not given a clutch of dragon eggs as a wedding gift. Will Smith's on-screen cousin Karen Parsons is next. Karen played the lead role of the ever-cute and spendthrift Hillary Banks in that NBC sitcom from 1990 to 1996, and was also in Major Pain, 1995, and Lush Life, 1996. This lady only has 8 movie credits to her name, and she's been in 13 TV shows so far, with the last being in 2002, and that's a pretty poor showing. She blames the lack of quality roles and too frequent typecasting for her on-screen absence. Her bold attempt to get back into the limelight with Lush Life, 1996, a sitcom that she created, produced, and had a lead role in, proved to be a failure, with critics savaging that Mean Girls copy so brutally that she pulled the plug on it after just 4 episodes. She decided to step back and pivot by getting married, having kids, and starting a nonprofit called Sweet Blackberry, whose focus was on educating little ones on the hidden aspects of Black history and telling the inspirational stories of Black heroes. Karen has authored 2 books and has a quartet of animated short movies on Netflix that are both entertaining and educational, as they should be since they are narrated by the likes of Queen Latifah and Chris Rock. Malcolm, in the middle, comes next, and his real name is Frankie Muniz, for those who didn't know. The year 2003 was very good to the then little Frankie Muniz. That precise year, he was considered one of the most bankable stars that Tinseltown could boast of, and it seemed like he was about to retire a lot of oldies and make Hollywood a solid perch from which he could never be booted out. But something very unexpected happened. The Agent Cody Banks star got bitten by the motor racing bug and decided in 2008 that his time and money would be better utilized in the open-wheel racing sector. He mostly stuck to it too, and from 2012 to 14 catered to his more artistic leanings by becoming a rock band drummer and going on a global tour with his King's Oil bandmates. In a January 2023 interview with CNBC, Make It, the actor says he wants to live the most fulfilled life I can, and notes that, "I've always felt like I was running out of time. Even when I was a kid, I just felt like I needed to take advantage of having the opportunity to do things." While there's no denying this fella's love for getting in a car and racing other guys, the reality is that he's in a very competitive and dangerous field and has suffered several broken ribs, plus a broken back. He also has severe memory issues, but blames that on concussions suffered in childhood. Then there is Superman's love interest, Kristen Crook. Crook, who as Lana Lang, had Superman eating out of her dainty hand in Smallville, 2001 to 2011. Kristen zoomed out of Smallville during the 8th season of the show, never to return, and since then has been doing a lot of under-the-radar flying. Part of that is due to the very negative publicity that came with her involvement with NXIVM. Ostensibly a multi-level marketing company that made it possible for folks to reach their full potential, NXIVM was later exposed as a horrifically depraved sex cult, and its founder is currently seeing through a 120-year jail sentence. Kristen Crook joined NXIVM at age 23 to deal with her shyness, and she left the organization in 2013. But her name, as well as that of another Smallville alumnus by the name of Allison Mack, is inescapably attached to that very disreputable organization, and all attempts to wash her reputation clean have been fruitless. Crook was in 8 movies from 2004 to 2017, and virtually all were box office bombs with mixed to negative reviews. With a record like that, it doesn't take much to understand why big studios are not in a hurry to have her star in their next blockbuster, and why Smallville has so far been the most successful artistic creation she's been involved with. Next up is funny man Sinbad, whose real name is David Atkins. He's famous for starring in movies like Jingle All the Way, 1996, and headlining The Sinbad Show from 1993 to 94. Like most celebs, Sinbad had problems controlling his spending habits and dug himself into a hole while waiting for a lead role in a big movie that would make a killing at the box office. That never happened, and the spendthrift filed for bankruptcy multiple times. While he's been able to keep busy in the entertainment sector, this guy, since the last century, was seldom able to put in performances that critics could madly rave about. And as recently as 2020, he suffered a stroke of such severity that he got hooked up to a ventilator and was in a coma for a while. Recent reports are that he's nicely recovering from his nearly fatal ischemic stroke. But before the stroke, he had knee surgery in 2010 and spinal fusion surgery 5 years later, and those 2 procedures took money out of his pocket and put him in a position where he wasn't able to leverage his talent to earn a living. So we would blame Hollywood's lack of eagerness to consistently give him roles, plus his health and financial problems, for Sinbad being a forgotten actor. Then we have Richard Gere, who can blame his going into oblivion on China. The American Gigolo, 1980, Pretty Woman, 1990, and Chicago, 2002 star still has skin in the game and has been starring in almost any movie he can get featured in. See, Richard Gere will never be a regular Hollywood staple, and it's all because of his religion and the Chinese government. Gere is a Buddhist who first developed interest in the religion during his 20s, and then spent from 5 to 6 years immersed in it as much as possible. After this, he went to Nepal and then to India, meeting the Dalai Lama in the latter country and becoming one of the most devoted supporters of that holy man. He's been vocal about demanding that the human rights of Tibetans be respected, currently supports various Tibetan independence movements, and in 1993, after denouncing Beijing's human rights records on stage, was permanently banned from being an Academy Award presenter. In 2007, Richard Gere said the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games should be boycotted as a means of applying pressure on China to grant Tibetan independence, and has generally been a thorn in Beijing's side. China has since responded by permanently banning him from setting foot in the country, and in addition, any movie he's in cannot be screened in China. The Chinese movie industry is enormous and enormously lucrative, and because of that, more than a few Hollywood studios have banned Gere from being featured in movies of theirs, as that would close off their access to the Chinese market. Plus, there's the fact that there are a lot of Chinese investors in Hollywood, and that bunch does not take kindly to Gere and all that he represents, and will consequently never allow him to be in a movie they're bankrolling. Gene Hackman, on the other hand, appears done with Hollywood, and not even a finger snap from Thanos might get him back into a movie lot. Ain't never heard of Gene Hackman? Well, this guy has a Wikipedia entry that's like a mile long. He also owns 2 Academy Awards, plus enough awards and nominations to keep any shelf weighted down. The French Connection, 1971, A Bridge Too Far, 77, Unforgiven, 92, and Crimson Tide, 95, are some of Gene's more notable works. As to why he's seldom seen on the big screen these days, back in July 2004, he sat down with Larry King to announce his retirement, mostly due to health-related reasons from acting, and has stayed true to his word. But since then, he's also starred in a couple of documentaries about the Marine Corps, and he should know a lot about the Corps because he enlisted when he was 16 and spent almost 5 years in China as a field radio operator. Gene, who has reinvented himself as an author, has been busy spinning some pretty mesmerizing stories on paper, and is often spotted driving himself around, working in his yard, and behaving as any happily retired fella would. Next up is Meg Ryan. This Top Gun, 1986, When Harry Met Sally, 89, and Kate and Leopold, 2001 actress, is in this 15 Forgotten Actors video, and that's honestly heartbreaking. As to what happened that made her scarce on our screens, Proof of Life is to be blamed. This was an action thriller movie that was released in 2000, and it had Meg Ryan and Russell Crowe in the lead roles. That particular movie got mixed reviews and barely made back its budget. Meg was at the time married and not very happy, and rumors began to swirl that she and Russell Crowe were dating. Why did that matter? Precisely because the entirety of her image had been built on her being a wholesome and family-oriented girl next door, who definitely would never cheat on her husband or engage in shady behavior. And then America's Sweetheart took things further by going nude in a mildly successful 2003 movie titled In the Cut. There's also the fact that she's gotten old and wrinkly and can't keep playing pretty ladies forever. Plus, she's been given a difficult tag in Hollywood that's been hard to shrug off. Meg Ryan has currently pivoted from acting to directing, but is still reportedly about to stage a Hollywood comeback. Y'all remember Saved by the Bell? Yeah, the seminal sitcom that had about as many accolades and spin-offs as some of you have drank chilled Bud Lights on Super Bowl weekend. Well, Lark Voors was one of the cast members of that show, and she was so good as the fashion-hip Lisa Turtle that she got a half a dozen Young Artist Award nominations and snagged the award twice. She has, of course, been in different shows and movies since then, popping up in Family Matters, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, The Parkers, and Grown Ups. Voorhees, since the year 2000, has only been in 6 movies, none of which made any splash worth mentioning. Her last movie appearance was back in 2012, and in over a 20-year time frame, from 2000 to 2023, she's only been in 5 TV series. As for why, well, she's not in the best of health. In 2012, the public became aware that all was not well with the star when she talked incoherently in a Yahoo video, and then sat down with people for a series of interviews, during which she behaved really oddly by doing things like talking to people that weren't there. It later emerged that she was bipolar, but Voorhees insisted she was not sick and had a deep spiritual sense that was being misinterpreted. She has since written a trio of books that are absolutely impossible to comprehend by all but the extremely inebriated, and in 2020 went on the Dr. Oz show to talk about her mental health issues and how it makes forming thoughts into words harder than cutting down a redwood with a shaving stick. Eric Bana, what happened to you? This Australian was in Black Hawk Down 2001, Hulk 2003, Troy 2004, and Munich 2005. And much unlike Seann William Scott coming up next, Bana's interpretation of his roles has often been applauded, and he's been nominated for and received a handful of awards. Movies like The Castle, 1997, Finding Nemo, 2003, Romulus, My Father, 2007, Mary and Max, 2009, Star Trek, 2009, and The Dry, 2020, for instance, had critics foaming at the mouth with glee. Now, Eric Bana has been in less than 30 movies and 10 TV shows since the year 2000, and that's a pretty poor showing in our opinion. Bana married in 1997 and currently has 2 kids. He lives in Melbourne and is the typical devoted family guy. Why does that matter? Well, the main reason he's been mostly forgotten is that his family won't let him reach for greatness. He's picky about his roles, and that's mostly because his wife and kids accompany him and live with him on movie sets, and therefore he cannot choose roles that might require him and his family to be in foreign countries for extended periods. Oh, what a lark life it would be to have skills and moolah like him. Then comes Seann William Scott, who played the offensive, rude, and immature Steve Stifler. Sean is no pushover, and the movies he's been in, like Dude, Where's My Car, 2000, Final Destination 2000 and The Dukes of Hazzard 2005 have pulled in a combined total of $4.91 billion at the box office. But there's one movie this guy will always be associated with, and that's the outrageous caper that was the American Pie series. Now, Seann William Scott, despite his larger-than-life on-screen persona, is an intensely private man, and the fact that he's not constantly in the news for one reason or the other affects his visibility and career prospects. He also doesn't seem to have the range of other actors, and movie critics delight in savaging his performances. Plus, he's been typecast so often as a stupid and foul-mouthed college jock that audiences have trouble seeing him as anything more than that. He lays part of the blame for his on-screen absence on the fact that raunchy and over-the-top comedies, rom-coms, and horror movies that flooded movie screens from varied Hollywood studios back in the late 1990s and early this century are not as popular as they used to be, and the comedy genre as a whole has declined in punch and reach. In a 2017 interview with Yahoo Movies, he had this to say: "In the beginning of my career, they were making way more comedies. There was a real appetite for comedy." In the same interview, he complained about always having to fight for roles, while also being picky about which role he accepts. He said, "Sometimes you go, okay, there's a lot of potential for this to be good. I just have to go in and try to do the best that I can. And that's all you do. But I also don't want to do a bunch of movies that I know are gonna suck." Click here to see 10 actors currently on drugs. See you there.